He picked up the phone with tired hands. A voice on the line told him it was the IRS, that he owed thousands, and federal marshals would seize his home unless he paid immediately. He was 72, retired, living alone in Appalachia, with a pension he'd scraped from a lifetime of coal dust and overtime. The voice sounded real. The fear felt real. He followed instructions and, in one afternoon, lost everything. What they did not know was that his shame would become fuel. His name was Harold. Hello, and welcome back to Revenge Stories. I'm Phil, and today I'll tell you Harold's story, how a broken man turned his fear into a fight and helped bring down a scam empire. If you like this channel, then please subscribe, hit the bell, and share. Harold was a 72-year-old retired coal miner from a small town in West Virginia. Life had been tough ever since the mines shut down. His wife Mary had passed away 5 years ago, and his children lived far away. Most days, Harold sat alone on his porch, listening to the trains in the distance, and thinking about the life he once had. Money was tight, but he managed to get by with his small pension. He wasn't rich, but he had pride in the fact that he never owed anyone a dime. That's when his phone rang, and everything changed. The voice on the other end introduced himself as an IRS agent. He sounded cold, professional, and frighteningly serious. The man told Harold that he owed back taxes, and that if he didn't pay immediately, officers would come to arrest him. Harold froze in his chair. He had never been in trouble with the law in his life. "I don't understand," Harold stammered. "I pay my taxes every year." But the voice grew harsher, warning him that his house could be seized and he could spend years in jail if he didn't settle the debt right away. The scammer ordered Harold to go to the store and buy gift cards. Confused and terrified, Harold hesitated, but the thought of being dragged to jail at his age left him panicked. "Don't tell anyone," the scammer warned. "If you talk about this, we'll have to send the police immediately." His heart raced as he grabbed his coat and walked out into the cold night. With shaky hands, he drove to the nearest store, every mile feeling like a countdown to his doom. In the back of his mind, he thought, what if they're right? What if I really messed up? Under the bright store lights, Harold stood in line clutching the gift cards the scammer told him to buy. His face burned with shame as he paid, certain the cashier could see through him. Back home, he called the number again and read out the codes one by one. Each number felt like he was tearing away a piece of his life savings. When the call finally ended, Harold sat in silence in his dark kitchen. His savings, everything he and Mary had put away, was gone. The room felt colder than ever. Tears slid down his cheeks as reality set in. The next morning, Harold finally realized the truth. The IRS would never demand gift cards. He had been scammed. His stomach twisted in knots as he whispered to himself, "How could I be so stupid?" He couldn't bear the thought of telling his children. They would think he was a fool. He sat at the kitchen table with his head in his hands, ashamed, humiliated, and broken. Every corner of the house reminded him of Mary, and now he wished she were there to comfort him. But instead, all Harold felt was the crushing weight of loneliness. Days passed, and Harold could barely bring himself to eat. He avoided phone calls, terrified it might be another scammer. At night, he sat awake, replaying the cruel words of the man who had stolen from him. But slowly, something inside him began to change. His grief hardened into anger. He thought of all the other seniors who might get the same call and lose everything. He clenched his fists and whispered, "No more. They took my money. They humiliated me. But I won't let them do this to anyone else." That night, Harold made a decision. He wanted revenge. Harold turned to his old computer and typed into the search bar, IRS scam calls. What he found shocked him. Thousands of people had fallen victim to the same trick. But among the warnings and articles, he found something else. A YouTube channel run by a man named Alex. In his videos, Alex exposed scammers, revealed their tricks, and even hacked into their systems to uncover their identities. Harold watched for hours, glued to the screen. For the first time since losing everything, he felt a flicker of hope. Maybe Alex could help him fight back. Nervously, Harold wrote an email to Alex. He poured his heart into it, how he had lost his savings, how embarrassed he felt, and how much he wished there was a way to stop these criminals. He didn't expect an answer, but the next morning, his inbox had a reply. "Harold," it began, "I'm so sorry this happened to you. You're not alone. If you're willing, I think we can do something together. These scammers think they're untouchable. Let's prove them wrong." Harold stared at the screen, stunned. His hands shook, but his heart felt lighter than it had in weeks. That night, Alex called him. His voice was calm, confident, and surprisingly kind. "You've already done the hardest part," Alex said. "You survived the scam. Now we're going to fight back." Harold was nervous. "I'm no computer man," he admitted, but Alex laughed softly. "That's okay. I'll handle the tech side. I just need you to be brave and play along with their calls. We'll gather evidence and I'll do the rest." Harold thought of Mary and of the shame he had carried. "All right," he said firmly. "I'll do it." The first call came only a few days later. The scammer's script was almost identical to the one that had fooled Harold before. Threats of jail, frozen accounts, urgent payments. But this time, Harold wasn't alone. Alex was on another line, recording everything and tracing the call. "Just stay calm," Alex whispered in his ear. "You're doing great." Harold pretended to panic, stringing the scammer along. Meanwhile, Alex's computer screen lit up with data. He was inside the scammer's system, uncovering their real location in India. Harold's hands trembled, but this time, it wasn't from fear. It was from purpose. After the first call, Harold felt a strange mix of nerves and excitement. For the first time since the scam, he didn't feel powerless. He and Alex went over the call together, laughing at moments where Harold had pretended to sound terrified. But beneath the laughter, there was anger. "These guys do this all day, every day," Alex said. "They don't care if it's someone's last savings or if it leaves them broken. They see people like you as nothing but easy prey." Harold clenched his fists. "Then let's show them what happens when the prey bites back." The next few days were intense. Alex guided Harold through multiple scam calls, each one more detailed than the last. Harold would act confused, ask questions, and stall for time while Alex dug deeper into their systems. Sometimes Harold's heart pounded as he spoke, fearing the scammers might catch on. But Alex reassured him after every call. "You're doing amazing, Harold. They think you're just another old man they can trick. They have no idea they're being recorded and traced." Harold couldn't help but smile. For once, the scammer wasn't in control. He was. One night, Alex called Harold, excitement in his voice. "I think we've found their hub. It's a big operation, dozens of people, all in a call center in India. They run scripts all day, pretending to be the IRS, Social Security, even banks. They're making millions." Harold sat back in shock. Millions? All stolen from people like him? "This isn't just about me anymore," Harold said. "They're ruining lives, families. We can't let them keep doing this." Alex agreed. "And we won't. With what we're collecting, we're building a case strong enough for authorities to act." But the work wasn't easy. During one call, a scammer grew suspicious. "Why are you asking so many questions, old man?" he sneered. Harold's throat went dry. For a moment, he almost hung up. But then he remembered Mary's photo sitting on the table beside him. He steadied his voice. "Because I want to make sure I'm doing this right." The scammer laughed cruelly and called him stupid. Harold bit his tongue, swallowing his anger. Once the call ended, he whispered to Alex, "That's the one. I want him exposed. Every last one of them." Weeks passed and Harold became sharper, more confident. He knew the scripts, the threats, the fake legal jargon. He could tell when a scammer was lying before they even finished their sentence. Each call he made with Alex felt like striking back. He was no longer a helpless old man. He was a weapon. But deep down, Harold also felt the weight of it. Late at night, he lay awake wondering how many other seniors were crying themselves to sleep, just like he had. That thought drove him harder. He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. He was fighting for them, too. Alex kept all their evidence in a growing file. Names, call recordings, scam scripts, bank accounts, and even webcam snapshots of the scammer's office. Harold couldn't believe his eyes when Alex showed him the pictures. Rows of young men in headsets, laughing, drinking tea, stealing lives one call at a time. "They look like kids," Harold muttered, "but they're monsters." Alex's jaw tightened. Exactly. And monsters don't stop unless someone makes them. For Harold, that sealed it. He wasn't just in this for payback anymore. He wanted to see this whole operation crumble to the ground. Then, one evening, Alex's voice buzzed with energy. "Harold, we're almost ready. I've been in touch with authorities overseas, and they're starting to take us seriously. Your recordings and testimony are solid proof." Harold's chest tightened. Could this really work? Could an old man in a small West Virginia town really help take down an empire halfway across the world? He glanced at Mary's picture and whispered, "This is for you, sweetheart. For every person they hurt." Alex's voice broke through his thoughts. "Get ready, Harold. The biggest step is coming." The next call was the most important. Harold needed to keep the scammer talking long enough for Alex to break deeper into their systems. His hands trembled as he dialed. The scammer launched into the usual threats, demanding money immediately. Harold played along, pretending to be desperate. Minutes dragged by like hours. Sweat beaded on his forehead. Then, Alex's voice whispered through the line, "I'm in." Harold nearly gasped. "Keep him talking just a little longer," Alex urged. Harold forced a shaky laugh. "I'm old, Sonny. These things take me time." It worked. Every second counted. When the call finally ended, Harold collapsed into his chair, exhausted. "Did we get it?" he asked. Alex's reply made his heart race. "We got everything. Their files, scripts, names, even recordings of their supervisors. Harold, this is gold. It's enough to shut them down." Harold couldn't believe it. The same voice that once called him stupid old man now had a name, a face, and evidence tied to a crime. For the first time, Harold felt true justice was within reach. He sat in silence, overwhelmed, whispering, "Mary, they won't get away this time." Alex worked through the night, organizing the evidence into a report for Indian authorities. Harold barely slept, pacing his small kitchen. His heart pounded with nerves and hope. This was it, the moment everything led to. By morning, Alex called him back. "It's done. I've sent everything. If they act on this, Harold, it could be the end of that call center." Harold gripped the phone tightly, tears in his eyes. "Then let's hope they do the right thing." In that moment, Harold didn't feel powerless anymore. He felt like a man on the edge of victory. 2 days later, Harold sat nervously at his kitchen table when Alex's voice burst through the phone, filled with excitement. "Harold, it's happening! Authorities raided the call center early this morning." Harold's hands shook as Alex described the scene. Police storming through the doors, scammers scattering like startled rats, computers seized, cash counted, and young men in handcuffs. For Harold, the words felt surreal. The men who had mocked him, drained him of his savings, and nearly broken him were now caught. He leaned back in his chair, whispering to himself, "Justice, at last." News spread quickly online. Videos surfaced showing officers lining up scammers against the walls, stacks of money piled on desks, and frightened workers covering their faces. Harold watched in silence, his emotions colliding inside him. Part of him felt triumphant, imagining their laughter silenced forever. But another part of him felt sorrow. Many of them looked so young, barely older than his grandchildren. For a brief moment, Harold pitied them. But then he remembered the victims, the tears, the lives ruined. His pity hardened into resolve. Justice had been served, and it was long overdue. Alex called again, practically shouting with pride. "Harold, your recordings, your testimony, that's what convinced them to act. You weren't just a victim, you helped stop this empire." Harold's eyes filled with tears. He had spent weeks calling himself foolish, weak, and broken. Now someone was telling him he had been the key to justice. He took a deep, shaky breath and said, "Then maybe losing everything wasn't for nothing. Maybe it saved others." Alex replied softly, "It did, more than you know." For the first time in weeks, Harold felt the weight lifting from his heart. But the money was gone. His pension check came in, barely covering the bills. He still ate canned soup most nights and kept the heat low to save on costs. The scam had taken nearly all his savings, and that reality stung every day. Yet something had changed inside Harold. Before, his life felt empty and small. Now he carried a sense of purpose. His pain had sparked something greater. He had stood up, and the world had noticed. He no longer saw himself as the old fool who fell for a scam. He saw himself as a fighter. The local paper ran a story about him. "Retired miner helps expose international scam." Neighbors stopped him in the street, shaking his hand and congratulating him. For years, Harold had felt invisible, forgotten in his quiet town. Now, people looked at him with respect. One man said, "You saved lives, Harold. Folks won't forget this." Harold smiled politely, but inside he still battled with the loss. He had gained dignity, but the savings he and Mary built together were gone forever. At night, he'd whisper to her photo, "I did it, Mary. I just wish you were here." Alex uploaded their journey to his YouTube channel with the title, "How Harold Helped Take Down a Scammer Empire." The video exploded, gaining millions of views. In the comments, strangers from around the world called Harold a hero. Many shared their own painful stories, how they too had been scammed, humiliated, and left with nothing. Harold sat at his old computer, reading every word with tears in his eyes. For the first time, he didn't feel alone. His suffering had become a voice for others, and that voice was echoing louder than he ever imagined. Soon, letters began arriving at Harold's mailbox. A widow in Ohio thanked him for saving her from almost falling for the same scam. A veteran in Texas wrote that Harold's courage gave him the strength to share his own story. Harold kept every letter in a shoebox, reading them whenever he felt weak. One evening, he pressed a letter to his chest and whispered, "Mary, can you believe this? People are thanking me, Harold Jenkins, the fool who lost it all." A small smile crept across his face, the first real smile in months. Alex invited Harold onto his live stream to share his story. Harold's hands trembled as he leaned into the microphone, knowing thousands were watching. His voice cracked as he spoke. "I was ashamed, I thought I was weak. But what I learned is that fear only feeds them. Don't give scammers that power. If you've been hurt, you're not alone." The chat flooded with support. "Thank you, Harold. You're a hero. This gives me hope." Harold wiped his eyes, overwhelmed. For years he felt invisible. Now, his words were reaching across the world. In his small town, Harold became a voice of awareness. Local community centers invited him to speak, warning seniors about scams. He stood at dusty podiums, telling his story with honesty and emotion. Some people cried, some hugged him, and many thanked him for saving them from the same fate. Though his savings never returned, Harold felt richer in another way. His experience was protecting others. He had turned his deepest wound into a shield for strangers. And each time he shared his story, the shame grew weaker, replaced by a quiet pride that warmed his heart. Still, the scars lingered. Sometimes when the phone rang, Harold's stomach twisted with fear. Sometimes he woke in the night, hearing the scammer's voice in his dreams, mocking him. But in those moments, he reminded himself of the raid, the handcuffs, the faces of scammers who thought they were untouchable. He reminded himself of the letters, the live stream, and the lives saved. Sitting on his porch one evening, watching the sun dip behind the hills, Harold whispered, "You didn't win. You thought you broke me, but you made me stronger." And in that moment, he believed it. After the raid, Harold and Alex spoke almost daily. What began as a partnership of necessity grew into an unlikely friendship. Alex admired Harold's resilience, while Harold found comfort in Alex's energy and determination. One evening, Alex said, "You remind me of my grandfather, strong, stubborn, but with a heart bigger than anyone realizes." Harold chuckled, shaking his head. "Strong? I was terrified." Alex replied firmly, "Strong isn't about never being afraid. It's about standing up after fear knocks you down, and you, Harold, did exactly that." Those words stayed with Harold long after the call ended. As the weeks passed, Harold noticed something change within himself. The man who once sat hunched in silence now held his head a little higher when walking down the street. He felt lighter, even in his small, creaky house. The scam had taken his money, yes, but it hadn't taken his dignity. He had earned it back, piece by piece, through courage and truth. One afternoon, Harold looked at Mary's photo and whispered, "I thought I failed us, but maybe I honored us instead. Maybe I made something out of the pain." And for once, he believed it. The scammer's downfall didn't end with the raid. News outlets in India reported on the arrests, exposing the call center's network and their ties to other criminal operations. Harold read every article he could find, his heart racing with each headline. "Scammer racket busted. International victims speak out." Every story reminded him that what he endured had not been in vain. It had led to something bigger, a movement, a warning, a line drawn in the sand. For once, scammers weren't winning. This time, they had been forced into the light, and Harold had played a part in it. Still, not every day was easy. One evening, Harold opened his bank app, staring at the empty account. The loss stung, sharp as ever. His shoulders slumped, and for a moment the shame returned. But then he remembered Alex's words. "You weren't just a victim, you were the key." Slowly, Harold closed the app and pulled out the shoebox of letters. Reading the messages of gratitude, he felt the darkness lift. Money could be lost, but respect, courage, and hope, those could never be stolen again. In that moment, Harold decided to hold on to what scammers could never touch. Alex, thrilled by their success, invited Harold to help on another project, raising awareness for scam victims worldwide. "You've lived it, Harold," Alex said. "People trust your story. Together, we can protect thousands more." At first, Harold hesitated. He was just a retired miner from West Virginia. What did he know about fighting global crime? But then he thought of Mary, of the nights he cried alone, of the millions still at risk. He nodded slowly and replied, "All right, Alex. If my voice can stop even one person from losing everything, then let's do it." Soon, Harold appeared in another of Alex's videos. This time, instead of recounting his own pain, he offered practical advice. If someone calls claiming to be the IRS, hang up and call back the official number. Never, ever give money over the phone. And remember, you have rights. Real agents don't threaten you. The video spread quickly, reaching families across the United States. Harold couldn't believe it. His words, spoken in his humble living room, were protecting people he'd never meet. He sat back after the recording, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Mary, look at me now." Harold's town began seeing him differently. At the diner, people waved him over, eager to hear his updates. The pastor asked him to share his story at Sunday service. Even children in the neighborhood whispered, "That's the man who took down the scammers." Harold laughed softly at the attention, but accepted it with quiet grace. He had once felt like nothing more than an old man counting pennies. Now, he was someone whose voice mattered. And though the emptiness of Mary's absence lingered, Harold felt he was honoring her memory in the best way he could, through helping others. But beneath the praise, Harold still carried scars. Sometimes when the phone rang late at night, his chest tightened with dread. He'd let the machine pick up, afraid of what voice might be waiting. Once, a telemarketer left a message, and Harold's hands shook as he deleted it. Recovery wasn't a straight path. He had faced the scammers, but the trauma lingered like a shadow. Still, each day he fought back, reminding himself of the raid, the letters, and the lives saved. Healing, Harold realized, wasn't about forgetting the pain. It was about finding strength despite it. One night, Alex called with news. "Harold, the Indian courts are pushing for long sentences. Some of those guys might spend decades behind bars." Harold listened quietly, his mind drifting. He thought of the scammers' mocking voices, their cruel laughter as they stole from him. He thought of their faces during the raid, pale with fear. Slowly, he whispered, "Good. Let them sit in the dark and think of every person they hurt." It wasn't revenge Harold wanted anymore. It was accountability. Justice wasn't about anger. It was about making sure no one else endured what he had. Harold's life settled into a new rhythm. He still lived in his modest house, still cooked simple meals, still missed Mary every day. But now, his days had meaning. He answered emails from victims, spoke at local gatherings, and joined Alex's online efforts. He wasn't just Harold Jenkins, the retired miner. He was Harold Jenkins, the man who stood up against an empire of scammers. Sitting on his porch one evening, watching the fireflies flicker in the dark, Harold whispered, "Mary, I'm not invisible anymore. I did something good." And for the first time, he truly believed it. As weeks turned into months, Harold's story spread far beyond his small town. News stations invited him for interviews. Senior centers asked him to speak, and even schools used his story to teach teenagers about online safety. Harold often chuckled at the irony. A retired miner from West Virginia, giving internet advice, he'd say, shaking his head. But people listened. They leaned in, hanging on his every word. And each time he spoke, Harold felt Mary's presence beside him, as though she were whispering, "I'm proud of you." That thought became his anchor on the hardest days. Alex never stopped thanking Harold. "You've done more than you realize," he told him during one late-night call. "You're proof that victims can rise above their pain. Without you, this raid might never have happened." Harold paused, emotions swelling in his chest. "I just wanted to make things right," he said softly. Alex replied, "And you did. You didn't just make things right for yourself. You made things right for thousands of people." Harold leaned back in his chair, staring at Mary's photo. For the first time since she passed, he felt at peace with himself. Still, Harold never forgot the day it all began. The trembling voice on the phone, the threats, the fear, the shame. Sometimes he replayed that moment in his head, wondering why he didn't hang up. But instead of punishing himself, he learned to see it differently. That moment, Harold whispered one evening, wasn't the end of me. It was the beginning of something bigger. He realized that pain had pushed him into action, and action had led to change. He had turned a moment of weakness into a legacy of strength, and that realization healed him. On a crisp autumn afternoon, Harold visited the town cemetery with fresh flowers. He placed them on Mary's grave and sat on the cool grass, talking softly. "You always told me I had more in me than I believed. I thought I was finished, but you were right, Mary. Even at 70, I still had something left to give." The wind rustled the leaves, almost like an answer. Harold sat quietly, tears rolling down his face, but this time they weren't tears of grief alone. They were tears of gratitude, for Mary, for Alex, and for the second chance life had given him. Meanwhile, Alex's channel grew rapidly, and he continued exposing scammers with Harold often by his side. Their collaboration became a beacon of hope online. Viewers sent messages like, "You saved my grandma," and "Because of you, I didn't fall for the scam." Each comment felt like fuel, strengthening Harold's resolve. He never imagined his darkest day would lead to helping strangers across the globe. Sitting in his old recliner, Harold whispered to himself, "Funny how life works, isn't it? They thought they broke me, but really, they built me into something stronger." One evening, Alex invited Harold to join him in person for a speaking event in New York City. Nervous but determined, Harold boarded a plane for the first time in decades. Standing on stage, he looked out at hundreds of faces, young, old, rich, poor, all waiting to hear his story. His voice shook at first, but then grew steady. "I was scammed. I lost my savings, but I didn't lose myself. And if you've been hurt, know this. You're not alone, and you're not powerless." The crowd erupted into applause. Harold felt taller than he had in years. After the event, a woman approached Harold with tears in her eyes. "My father lost everything to scammers. Hearing you today gave him hope again. Thank you." Harold squeezed her hand gently and said, "That's why we fight back. Not for money, but for dignity." As she walked away, Harold realized something important. Revenge hadn't been about hurting scammers. It had been about restoring hope to people like him. People who felt invisible, broken, or ashamed. That was the real victory. And in that moment, Harold finally let go of the anger that once consumed him. Months later, Harold sat on his porch, the evening sky painted in shades of gold and violet. Alex's latest video played softly on his laptop inside, but Harold was lost in thought. He thought about his journey, from fear and shame to justice and healing. He thought about Mary, his neighbors, the letters from strangers, and he realized that while the scammers had stolen his money, they had accidentally given him something priceless: purpose. With a deep breath, Harold whispered into the fading light, "They didn't take my story. They gave me one worth telling." In his heart, Harold knew he was nearing the twilight of his years. But unlike before, he no longer feared being forgotten. His story lived on through Alex's videos, through the letters, through the people he had touched. He wasn't just Harold Jenkins, the old miner. He was Harold Jenkins, the man who stood up, who fought back, who proved that even the most ordinary life could leave behind an extraordinary legacy. That night, He slept peacefully, knowing Mary would be proud, knowing the world would remember him not as a victim, but as a fighter. And that, my friends, is Harold's story. A man who lost everything, only to discover strength he never knew he had. He showed us that even in the face of cruelty, resilience can shine brighter than despair. So, if you've been hurt, scammed, or broken, remember Harold. You are not powerless. You are not alone. Thank you for watching. My name is Phil, and this is Revenge Stories. If you enjoyed today's video, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you have your own story of betrayal or revenge, email it to me. You might just hear it told here next time.